Hi guys, it's April. One of these days I am going to figure out a good way to introduce these end of month wrap-ups besides it's the end of the month, but today kind of isn't that day. Yeah, that was my subtle way of saying I don't know what words to use right now, but this is the end of month wrap-up for August. I do have a mid-August wrap-up that talks about the first couple of books that I read in this month, so this is going to be a wrap-up of the last 2 weeks. So if you want to check out the first part of the month, click the link wherever I decide to put it on the screen and down below. And now we will get on to the rest of the month. I won't lie, the end of this month was the slumpiest reading experience I've had since starting book 2. I started and stopped so many books, it was insane. And that kind of slump might explain why my ratings are kind of neutral for these next couple books that I'm about to talk about. My brain just didn't really get into a lot of the stories and I just couldn't figure out where I wanted to be. So I did spend a lot of time coloring, like I talked about before. Kirby Rosanth has captured me with his imagery and I love to color. So a lot of things happened in these coloring books instead of me reading. See, aren't they pretty? And I just love markers. So I may or may not have ordered, myself a set of Copic markers because I am a designer and Copics sound absolutely amazing. I know they'll probably bleed as I'll get out, but I want to do some blending and have fun with these images and maybe find a book that I enjoy. I do document my whole coloring adventure on my Snapchat, so if you want to follow that, I don't know how exciting that'll be, but it is there in case you want to check it out, and you can see me play with the Copic markers when they finally get here. The designer in me is extremely excited about getting these markers whenever they arrive. I don't know when that'll be. But you are not here to hear me talk about being artsy and fartsy and all kinds of designery. You are here to hear me talk about books. So I will now talk about the books I read this month. So I picked up my first Kara Cass book with Siren. I wanted to get a feel for her writing style without investing myself fully into a series. So this seemed like a good place to start. And several of my booktube friends have suggested Kara Cass in various different ways, so this was my start of my Kara Cass journey. Siren is about Kaylin, who becomes a siren. She is supposed to spend 100 years serving the ocean, calling people in, and then at the end of those 100 years, she can continue on her human life. The problem is, about 80 years into Kaylin's journey, she of course meets a boy. She's been struggling with some of the things she's had to do being a siren, but it just all escalates when she finally meets this boy who she has an instant connection with. This is a story about making decisions, what is living, how to cope with different kinds of relationships, and what being human may or may not be about. I enjoyed the story. It was quick, it was sweet. I struggled a little bit with some of the Insta connections. I guess I'm just at a point in my life where I don't connect with those kind of things anymore. I love the long, drawn out relationships, the romance of it all. So Insta connections, I don't get that excited about anymore, but I did love how a lot of this story is based off of sisterhood and relationships and good and bad of said relationships. So that had it going for it. I still am not 100% sure if I am going to dive into the selection series just yet, but overall I was okay with Kara Cass's writing style. So that will not be a hindrance if I do decide to move on. Then I read Hidden Bodies by Caroline Kepnes. This is book 2 in the U series where we follow Joe and his very weird mind and associations with relationships and how messed up people can get in the brain but still think that they're thinking the right way. This book is all kinds of mental weird It continues on as Joe deals with all the things that he did in You and moving on to different kinds of relationships and whether or not some of his past will catch up with him. If you don't like getting into the minds of psychopathic people, do not read this book. I found it fairly interesting, and there were times where I was rooting for him to do things that he probably shouldn't do because I got a little bit wrapped up in his mindset, and I think that's okay because that was the intention of the story, but it really makes you think. Makes you think about how we all perceive the world and how right and wrong is different for all of us depending on how our minds are set up to work. Yeah. Just this weekend, I put up a review for this book, which is The Chronicle of the Three, Bloodline by Tabitha Caplinger. I won't go too much into depth of all of the thoughts and feels. If you want to know about those, I suggest going and watching that review. But I did receive this book in trade for an honest review. I enjoyed it. It was nice and quick because it's nice and short. It is about Zoe and her aunt Claire and learning out what it means to be a daughter of the three and part of the bloodline, good versus evil, light and dark, and it is a Christian fiction. It was a fun adventure. I finally got around to Lady Renegades by Rachel Hawkins. This is the third book in the Rebel Belle series, where we have Harper Price, who has suddenly received these powers in order to protect the Oracle. I won't go too much into what the story is for this one because it is book 3 in a series, but let's just say I wasn't overly impressed with this book because, first of all, the storyline wasn't that exciting after the somewhat okay storylines of the first two in Fighting the Good Fight, and suddenly this one was just kind of meh. And I am not one who is in favor with convenient endings. I'm not a huge fan, so I wasn't overly impressed with this book. Lastly, there was Dollhouse by Anya Ayland. This is the first book in the Dark Carousel series. Dollhouse is a story of Cassie, whose best friend, Aisha, suddenly disappears when a group of her friends goes out into the wilds of Australia, gets mad, runs off, and suddenly no one knows where she went. Cassie and her group of friends decide that they need to go back and find out what has happened to Aisha. And there is a creepy house involved in the story, and it gets really weird and really trippy very quickly. This is one of those books that I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it yet. I might be thinking on it a while before my brain fully processes and shifts how I think. I've noticed that trend for a lot of my reviews recently, that after I give so much time to it, things kind of warp in a different way. Most of the time they don't change the rating, but I just finished this book today, so I'm not 100% sure what I feel about all of it. The story does move very quickly. You don't feel like you connect with a lot of the characters, especially with the amount of characters that are added to the story, but it is a very trippy trip, and I do like trippy trips. If you're really interested in seeing if my brain shifts or not, follow me on Goodreads, but I don't know. It's one of those days. It's one of those months. I don't know. So those are the 5 books that I've read in the past 2 weeks. I don't know what I feel about that. I am kind of ambivalent to a lot of things right now. So tell me the last book that you were just, I don't know what to think about in the comments down below, and I heart your beautiful faces. Bye.